Luke, we told you offline that we are getting great vibes from you from a first impression standpoint, and that you're already so personable. And because of that, we're just so happy to dive into this episode because I think a big part of this show will be about kind of how solopreneurs can differentiate themselves and stand out, which I think you just did within the first 3 seconds of us meeting you. But before we dive in, just to piggyback off of we like this guy mode, you chose the icebreaker question that nobody chooses. And so we're so thrilled to ask, what is the wildest thing that's happened to you as a solopreneur?
Oh, I love this question. See, it's so interesting that people don't choose it because it's like these are the best stories, you know? So it's like I love sharing this stuff. And I also am a firm believer in life that you can learn a lot more from my scars than my accolades, you know? So I like talking about these interesting experiences because they're real. Um, so yeah, probably the wildest thing that happened to me was 3 days before I got married. We had two things happen. So at the time I had an agency and I was a solopreneur with the agency, in the sense that it was just me there doing my thing. I did have a friend that was helping with the finance side of things. And he would basically give me reports, all the time of things that, where the numbers were at and all of those things. And this was my first time owning my own business. So I just basically blindly listened to the numbers that were there. And at the time, we were basically reselling a software that was really effective and it's helping people grow their Instagram accounts, all that kind of stuff. And then, I wake up one day and Instagram updated their API so we could no longer connect to it with the software, which essentially made our service be completely obsolete. So I went from having hundreds of clients that were on this thing to it not working overnight. Right. And so it's just one of those times where you're like, all right, I have to pivot quickly. So that in itself is a big wake up call. But then I go to see how much runway we have, right? Because you got a little cash in the bank. And I was dumb enough, frankly, to always just listen to the person that was doing the finances. He just give me a report. I think that's what the numbers was. First time I'm actually looking at the bank account. Again, stupid thing, I know. But the numbers, the money wasn't there. And come to find out, the person that was doing a lot of the financing, there was some stuff that happened there, and all these kinds of things, taking money, da 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 da. That's another long story. So it's 3 days before my wedding, and I have now no business at zero. And I also figured out all the money I thought I had to be able to go and have runway to start something out was also at zero. And the person was a relatively close friend. He was invited to my wedding. And he was the person that ended up doing this thing to me. And so had to relearn things quickly, pivot, grow from it. But I will say the positive in the story that I took from it, apart from obviously, don't be dumb and manage your finances well, is the fact that it's like, even though I lost everything in that moment, I was able to rebuild it. And I was able to rebuild it faster because I had skills that I had learned from the time before. And that was just that's something I've always taken with me is this persistency because, any day you can lose your business, you can lose your income, but no one can take away your mindset. No one can take away your skills. No one can take away your relationships, and you can rebuild just as fast as you lost it. And so that was an important lesson for me to learn.
Wow, what unbelievable. That's what I gotta, the elephant in the room is, did that guy come to the wedding?
You know what? He actually did come to the wedding. So, I'm personally a Christian myself, and so I'm like, look the other way, do the things. And so I forgave him and moved on and tried to apply those principles there. So,
Wow,
yeah.
you're a better man than I.
I know.
Elephant in the room. Did your father-in-law know all this happened 3 days before? And how was that exchange at the aisle? When
Great question. The answer is no. I kept this one to myself, throughout this, I'm like, all right, this is my problem. And so avoided that exchange until I was able to provide the solution, and then now it's a good story, now I can tell it because we have a solution to the story. So
Had to ask. As a bride, I had to ask. Well, Luke, thank you so much for being that transparent and just sharing that story. And hopefully this is a lesson for future guests. It's a good idea to share these types of stories. But you have built early on, you built a personal brand identity that really resonated with people. And in the topic of just standing out in a crowded market, how important do you think personal branding is for solopreneurs today? And how should they start with it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And for a little context to my answer, my first business that I started was I was in the affiliate marketing world, and so I wasn't really a solopreneur because someone else was building the product, doing all that kind of stuff. But I got paid for commissions by driving sales to the website, right? Oh, yeah.
Stop. You're a solopreneur.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. Yeah. Okay.
You were a solopreneur. No. Affiliate marketers can be solopreneurs. It's okay if somebody else building it. You didn't employ them. You weren't giving them a W-2.
You know what? That's actually very true. Okay, so I was
Very
a
important to us.
solopreneur in that world. You're right. All right, corrected. All right, so I was still a solopreneur in that world, and like at that point, all you're doing is marketing and sales. That's the goal, and you get paid commissions on what you do. And if you can recruit a team and teach them how to do it, you get override commissions on that, right? And so I started this when I was 19 years old in college. I just wanted to figure out a way to make money online. I knew that was the future. I wanted freedom and wanted to go and figure this thing out. And what ended up happening for me is I struggled a lot in the beginning for people to take me seriously because I had no track record. I was just a college kid, frankly, at Michigan State University. Why would anybody listen to me? But what I started to learn, this is back in 2013, is that I always knew that first impressions lasted a lifetime. My parents taught me that really young, but I started to learn that the first impression oftentimes in the digital age was an online first impression. So it was like a Google search or a social media search rather than a handshake or a conversation. And so when I anticipated that and I realized that, I was like, man, what if I started instead of just posting random college stuff online, I started to post, personal development stuff, talking about business, position myself as a professional, had a professional profile picture, all these little things. This was on Facebook at the time. I'm like, then when I'm messaging these people to see if they're interested in my product or service, they're not going to think they're talking to some random college shit. I'll actually be professional. Maybe they'll give me the time of day behind that. And so that's when I consciously started to really focus on building my brand. And I saw measurable results behind that. And through just frankly, trial and error, I figured out strategies to be able to go and build my personal brand. I taught my team to do that. And that's why from 19 to 23, I built an affiliate organization of, 30,000 people across 50 states and 20 different countries. Average age was probably 22 years old. And it was all really on, personal branding on social media. And using that to sell the products essentially. And so I tell that to be able to just say that is so important. And that's why I do what I do today, which is, I'm in the PR world, the branding world, because we tell people, listen, that first impression is a Google search or a social media search, and they're going to judge you in a matter of seconds. And it's going to be a simple unconscious judgment. Like this person's legit, this person isn't, whatever, but that moment is going to determine whether or not they give you access to them, if there's a further conversation. And so positioning yourself online as a credible authority in your space, I think is so important. And I look at it as an asset. I look at it as a digital asset. The bigger your brand is with time, as more attention goes online, right? And I think attention is the currency of the digital economy. It's going to make that asset be worth more and more and more. And if you can start to build a reputation of being someone who's known in your space for a particular thing, referrals come from that. If you're running ads, it helps to have the conversion rates behind it. And so that being said, I think it's extremely important. The second question is what should people do right now to start building it? It's as simple as just starting on social media and committing to posting once a day on whatever platform you want. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, yeah, they all have their pros and cons. We can dive into that later. But if you can just pick a platform and you can actually focus on committing content and posting it every single day for a year, it's a muscle that you start to go and build. And you start to realize, wait, I can just copy that post and put it over to another platform. And now I'm posting on every platform, right? And you'll start to, it's also a positive feedback loop. I think of it like going into the gym. If you're overweight, you go to the gym, that first workout, you don't see a bunch of success, right? You make that first post, no one engages with it, right? But it's a process. And if you commit to it, that's why I say for a year, you will start to see that progress and you start to build this muscle of creating content. And it actually, for me, it becomes kind of fun, to be able to go out there and do. So I think that's the first step that people need to go and commit to is pick a platform that you feel comfortable creating content on and just create on it every day for a year. And it's an amazing start.
Can I back up for a second because of clarification? We're using the term building a personal brand,
Yeah.
And I have a picture in my head that maybe matches other people's, maybe doesn't. I don't know. But I always think of a personal brand as something that not everybody can do it. Not everybody has the personality to build a personal brand. And some people are really good at it. And other people, even if you do all the steps, it's not going to work as well. If you have a great personality, Carly's an extrovert, I'm an introvert, right? So I'm the kind of person that given the choice between posting on social media or getting, in front of the camera and getting in front of a spreadsheet or, whatever, I'm going to pick the spreadsheet. And so I'm just wondering what your take is on generally about personal brand. Can anybody develop a personal brand? And follow on, since you went into social media, you say post every day, but there's got to be some kind of best practices for what you post, how you post, so that it's not just, content for the sake of content. So please.
Yeah, great question. So to answer the first one is like, are there certain people that are the right for the personal brand versus not? I am of the belief that everyone should build a personal brand. But I think that the brand needs to be your authentic voice. And what I mean by that is that people like myself, or it sounds like Carly, who are more extroverted and things like this, maybe we're going to thrive on a video platform, where we can just talk and do our things and make that stuff happen. And that's amazing. And that's going to be most comfortable for us. Someone who's more like analytical and thought provoking like yourself, maybe it's more like taking time to go out there and do written posts, and you're providing content and insight and strategies and insight and that type of thing. But my point is that people like people who are like them. And so there are a lot of people on social media right now that think the same way that you do. They're much more analytical, they're much more logical, and they actually like the slower talking, more detail, that type of thing. And they're attracted to that because that's who they are. And so you can build an audience of people who are like you in the same way that somebody who is, more like me, extroverted, speaking loud and things like this, like they would be more attracted to me. And so I challenge people when they say, hey, I'm just not the personality for a personal brand. I'm like, I don't know about that. It's like, because all a personal brand is to me is taking who you are offline and putting that online. That's the idea, is that when I work with someone, it's like, I want to take your authentic offline reputation and I want to copy and paste that online so that when people look you up and see your content, they get the same impact as if they had a conversation with you. And they feel like they know you because of that being there. Because if you don't have that content up there, you leave it up for interpretation, whatever the algorithm pushes up or whatever that may go and be, and people's minds go a little bit crazy. So I do actually think that anyone can go and build a personal brand in that way. What was the second question? What was the follow-up one more time?
You said you pick a social media platform and post every day.
Yeah.
But it's got to be more than just posting, because I can post every day about my dog. Probably wouldn't do a lot for my solopreneur business.
Yeah.
So
no, great question.
Maybe it would, because he's a cute dog. So
yeah, if you had a cute dog, maybe that'll help. I would say this. I say two things with it. So number one is, it's almost like, again, somebody who is extremely, I have a friend, for example, who's 400 pounds. He was 400 pounds. He lost 200 pounds. He created a body program, and now he helps people with like massively obese body transformations. That's his thing. And whenever he works with somebody for the first time, the goal is not to go to the gym and do all these, here's your workout routine and go do that. It's just like go for a walk. And a walk can be literally to the end of your driveway and back. And then you maybe go a little bit further the next day, and then a little bit further the next day. And you just start taking this small incremental steps that's a little bit better than where you're at today. And so when I talk about the personal branding thing, committing to going and posting, it's kind of like someone committing to just going to the gym. You're not committing to the specific lifts you're going to do when you go to the gym. You're just committing that you're going to actually go to the gym. And if you show up to the gym, you're probably not just going to show up and leave. You're going to pick up some weights and start doing some stuff, right? And so the concept of posting is just building that muscle of posting some sort of a content. Now, when we're talking about what do you post, that's a little bit of a different story. Like I always teach people to create content buckets. And so what I mean by that is, it's like, or think of them like pillars of your brand. So if you think of like who you are, like for me, I'm like, I do like my family, I have business stuff, and then I have lifestyle things, and like those are kind of like all the content that I post is like falling within those three buckets. And so we talk about kind of like posting your dog. It's not going to do much for your solopreneur business, but you'd be surprised. Some people are dog people, and they just see that side of you, and they're like, oh, wow, he's a dog person. Me too. And now there's some, relatability that's being there with some person. So I don't say only post your business stuff 24/7. Post who you are, and from a business standpoint, there does need to be some strategy there, right? So like for me, for example, we're working with a lot of people who are thought leaders. So like consultants or coaches or things like this. And so it's like, I'm going to be posting content that's relevant to that audience. Like I'm not posting about real estate because that has nothing to do with my audience that's there. And so when it does come to posting, you do want to think about, okay, who is the person that I'm intending this to go to? Like who am I creating this content for? And what problems do those people have that I can solve with this content? And you create the content with the end user in mind. I like to think of it as if I'm just talking to one person, and I'm like, I'm just talking to one person as a conversation. They have a problem, and I'm just talking them through that. And I'll pretend like I'm having that conversation to then create that content around that. And it's really helpful with that way. And so I would say, again, that the key is just showing up and being there. If you actually show up and post every single day, I guarantee you will start to figure out the content because you're going to get sick of posting your dog every single day. You're going to be like, I got to actually post something else. And then you're going to think about what else should I post? And you'll start to kind of start this creative process of figuring it out. And quite frankly, you'll never know if you have the perfect, you're never going to have the perfect content, but like you use the engagement as a feedback loop. Like you'll make one post that gets a lot more engagement than the other ones. And you're like, ooh, people like this topic. Now, how can I create other iterations off of that one? And now your focus is more around that thing. So if you are showing up and you are posting based on the engagement, you'll get feedback of what type of content your audience resonates with. And then you iterate around that.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Thank you.
Luke,
Yeah, great questions.
I want to circle back for a sec because you kind of went through something really quickly. Can you restate those stats of when you scaled your affiliate business? Because those were mind blowing. And I want you to restate them because I have a question for you after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we scaled it from, it was when I was 19 to 23. We scaled it from me to about 30,000 people across 50 states and 20 different countries.
What were you selling?
It was a health and wellness product, a healthy energy drink, believe it or not.
Well, so I wanted you to reiterate that because I think one of the things that solopreneurs mess up a lot is scaling, and they try to do it too quickly or they don't have the timing right. You clearly scaled something well. What advice do you have for solopreneurs who want to scale without employees, and any red flags that they should avoid?
Yeah, it's a great question. The answer is number one is you have to have your fulfillment dialed in, right? Like you have to have, if you're selling whatever service, you have to make sure that that can be fulfilled with some sort of a partner that can take that taken care of. So if you're all in web services, make sure whoever's creating your website has the capacity to take on a lot more clients, right? Or whatever the service is, if you're kind of have vendors that are there. And so you have to have the back end in place. That's like the first most important thing to scale. Because if that's not in place, you can create all these new sales, but then customers aren't happy and then it starts to go in the wrong direction. And so I would say that's the most important thing is having that foundation in place. And if you can get the foundation for your fulfillment in place, then like for me, that's what I was saying. I was like, okay, not really a total solo entrepreneur, but I was, you're right. You corrected that because I worked with a company that already had like their whole model is like, we do the fulfillment, you guys do the distribution. And so all I had to do was focus on the distribution. And that was the only thing that was there. And so it was so simple for me to scale because literally everything in the back end worked, all the technology, all the fulfillment, all the everything. I just had to get people to click buy and I knew everything else was taken care of. So that's really important to have.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. But yeah, it was just so funny because you mentioned that and I was like, that sounds like a big number. And I don't know
Yeah,
if that's
it was pretty cool. And another thing to mention, I think it's worth talking about on that is that like I was also like I had no experience before that. Like I was a dumb frat rat college kid at 19, like had no experience. And just frankly, I had some like, things happen. I made bad choices in my life where I was just like, all right, I got to get my life together. And I just had like this naivety enough to believe that I could go and do it. It was like this company had been around for, a long time, like, I mean, not that long, but 10 years, before I got into it. And, they hadn't done over $71 million in sales, and then we started this kind of like young person thing within it. And we took the company to, I think, $230 million in sales. And so the point is it's like, sometimes you just have to have the courage to try. And there's a certain level of naivety that does have to go in it. Because if I looked at the stats of like what percentage of people succeed and like this types of stuff, like I was all working against me. I had no prior anything, but with the right, I guess, ambition and dream and vision, as long as you continue to learn and grow, it's like anyone can really go make anything happen. So don't let your past hold you back from starting. I think that's a big thing for people.
I used to work with a guy that had a saying, which was, we can do anything because we're stupid.
I love that.
and it's true. It's like you see so many amazing things happen from people that weren't educated, knowledgeable enough to know that everybody believed it couldn't be done and just went and did it.
Exactly.
And I love that. I love your story.
Yeah,
It's
awesome.
so good. Well, so okay, you were talking about, I mean, you run a PR firm now and you help people stand out and help them get leads and everything. But my question, so we were talking about social media and the putting in the reps for a year, but what if there's a solopreneur that has limited time, limited budget, and they're like, well, Luke, that's cute and all, but I don't have a year to start bringing in leads. What would you say is the most like cost effective, efficient way to generate leads for solopreneurs these days?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way that I did it when I first started is you start off with your warm market that you have. So everyone knows people, and you know people who know people, and the people closest to you usually sometimes they don't support you, and that's tough. I dealt with that, but oftentimes they do also really want you to go and succeed. And so just creating a list of people that I mean, literally, I took pen and paper and just like sat down of like who are the people that I know that could potentially be interested in this? And I just wrote down a name. And I just sat there and built as big of a list as I possibly could. And then I literally just called every single person and just saw if they'd be interested in what it is that I was doing. And I'll also say this is that in the very beginning, like if you're in the very, very, very beginning of what you're doing, um, people may not trust you yet, right? Because you're just starting this thing. And so another thing that I did in the beginning that worked well is that I created like I called it like a quote unquote beta group. And so basically it was just some people that I was doing services for free in exchange for testimonials and for case studies. And so I would go and do that. And so I would say, hey, I want to do the service for you. I'll do it for free. This is what I want in exchange. If you like it, do a testimonial, record a case study for me. And if you know anyone, if you'd make an introduction, that would be amazing. And that is a great way to build goodwill with people, build up some case studies. Cause again, you're just starting off. So people are like, do they actually know what they're doing? And if you can be like, yes, look at what this person's experience was, look at what this person's experience was. And then you also build some positive goodwill within your network because a lot of stuff in the beginning comes from warm market referrals. That's just the reality of it until you can start to invest into some sort of form of marketing.
Yeah. I know so many people that we've had on the show have been like, I forgot to tell people what I do.
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
I like, it's like, oh, and I tell a funny story of, like over a decade ago, listening in on a conversation my parents were having, and they were like, yeah, she's a creative director for an ad agency. I didn't work at an ad agency and I have never been a creative director. And it's just like those low hanging fruits that you don't think about, like your warm list and all of that, where it's like, oh yeah, like that people think it has to be so complicated and they have to go by these best practices from a marketing formula. And it can be as simple as what you just said.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Literally, I mean, I try to get people to just think of it as math. Like it's literally just the law of averages, like there's a certain number of people out there who are interested in your services and a certain number of people that aren't. Okay. And your job is not to convince the ones who aren't to want it. It's to sort through all of them to find the ones who are looking for what you have, like that's the goal. And you can do that, with ads. You can do that with like high cold outreach and like automated email campaigns and all these types of things. But you can also do that by just writing down a list and calling people, And so it's like it's just the numbers have to make sense. That's it. It's like there's a law of averages. Again, you do something often enough, a ratio appears. You call 10 people, maybe one of them is interested, right? So now you have a 10% conversion rate. You want 10 clients, call 100 people, like and or whatever your rates are. And so I think you just have to have the grit to be able to be willing to kind of like trudge through the mud and get a bunch of these no's in order to find the few yeses, that are there. But I think that's challenging for people because especially if you're a first-time solopreneur, it feels very vulnerable, and you're putting yourself out there. And sometimes when people say no to your business, you can feel like they're saying no to you as a person because it's such like a personal part of you. So you almost take it as like a personal rejection. And it's not. They're just not ready for the business. So you just move on and go to the next one. But some people can't get through that kind of like emotional gymnastics or mental gymnastics so it holds them back from making all those phone calls or doing the things that you need to do or posting on the brand because they're scared of what people think, right? And that just if you want to be successful as a solopreneur, you can't have that. You have to get through that fear. And the only way you get through that fear is by running straight at it and doing it even though you're scared, and then you start to realize, oh, it's wasn't so scary.
oh. Well, so if you were just starting out today, I'm assuming this would be one of the first things that you would do, but what else would you do to start building momentum? This, posting every day, anything else? If you were your 19-year-old self right now with your current business, what would you do?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's as a solopreneur, the first goal is to get profitable, right? Like that's the first goal. So it's like for me, if I started up a business today, like the very first thing I would do is figure out like how can I get profitable as quickly as possible? And I would try to get my first few customers that are there, but the reason I would do that is because I already have the mindset with it. Like if I was talking to my 19-year-old self yet who'd never done this before, the first thing I would do is get his head straight, and start to get them expectations, managed a little bit. Because I think so many people also like see these people on Instagram living these crazy lifestyles and they think it happens overnight, and it doesn't. It takes time, like I try to tell people like think in decades instead of days, and it's hard to do in today's society. But like if you can have that long-term mindset, if you can have the resilience and understand that every no is just taking you closer to another yes, and you get that mindset with it, I don't think you can lose, and so like I would really try to really communicate to myself having the correct mindset around entrepreneurship and solopreneurship, and I think if you get that straight, the tactics and the techniques, you will eventually figure them out, right? I mean, there's the story of I think it was Thomas Edison, right, creating the light bulb. He failed so many times, and he was interviewed like, you failed 10,000 times creating the incandescent light bulb. Why didn't you quit? And he answered by saying, you see, that's the difference between you and me. I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. And I eventually figured out a way that works. And so the way that most of the world look at it is 10,000 failures. He looked at it as 10,000 successes because he figured out all the ways that didn't work. And it's a simple shift in the way you think, but it makes all the difference, I think.
Mm. Glass
Absolutely.
half.
I love that. That's right on. It's you find those failures and people get pushed down. They just feel like, I can't do this. And it's like, no. You just figured out something that doesn't work. And great perspective.
Well, and I feel like if I were listening to this episode, I'm like, okay, I need to figure out what's profitable. I need to do social. I need to reach out to my warm leads. There's so much to do. And I feel like it's kind of like a hustle, get it done. But you're not big on hustling, at least not anymore. And imagine your 19-year-old self may have been scrappy and like just trying because you could. But for solopreneurs that got into solopreneurship for lifestyle and to make it to their kids' ballet recital and whatever, what kind of systems can they put in place so that they're not working around the clock, not constantly hustling, and actually living a well-balanced life?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In my opinion, like Frank, it's just my experience, okay? And my personal experience within it, I actually do think you have to have a little hustle in the beginning, like I really do. I think that I think of it like a jet plane taking off. If you look at the fuel, they use 80% of their fuel on takeoff, but then once they're up there, they can just glide with it, and it's pretty simple to go and do. So to like get the rocket to take off, to get the thing off the tarmac, it takes a certain level of energy. And there are sacrifices that have to go out there and be made. And that's an unavoidable reality is what I found in my career. Once you do it, once you figure it out, like then you can build systems around all of these things, take the most important thing to build a system around is customer acquisition. Like how can you consistently and predictably create customers, and for you, what is that model? There's so many different strategies. You can create a landing page and drive traffic to that. You can go and do an affiliate program and maybe affiliates are referring people to you in that way. Maybe you're doing cold outbound on email. You find a vendor that sends a bunch of emails on your behalf and they set up leads for you, right? Like there's so many different ways that you can go out there and do this. So the specific tactics and strategies are unlimited. But you have to figure out the core basics of like, number one, like who is my customer and how do I solve their problems, and you have to figure that out. And then it's be like, how can I consistently get them in front of me, And so again, like I wish I had an answer where it's like, if you're starting out today, you do A, B, and C software and you can, work 10 hours a week and make, 5,000 a month for the rest of your life, but in my experience, that dream is not real. And you have to actually put in like a short-term sacrifice to get this thing going. And so, and for me, like I had to restart, right? Like with my wife when we got married and restart, like I'd have a conversation with her. I was like, listen, like I went back to zero, just so you know. All right. So I need to build this and it's going to take a lot of energy and effort, and I want you to know that like I'm doing this for you. And like if it ever gets too much and you need more of me, like I need you to communicate that to me. But right now, like I have to get this going for us and our future family. And it was a lot of work in the beginning, but as you mentioned, as you start to build them out, you can systemize this with, especially with software and technology and everything that you have now. Like you can basically take the things you were doing manually and you just automate that, like you get a technology to come in and do it for you. You get a vendor to go in and do it for you. So I think first you got to figure out what works by like going through that process. But then after you figure out it works, the next question is like, all right, how can I outsource it essentially? Like, how can I leverage this through a software or maybe a third party vendor that can do this for me? And then you get that time back and you work on the next thing, and you just do that throughout your business until all the components of it have been, outsourced essentially through technology or some sort of a support vendor. And that's when you can have this freedom, to really do what you want. But I really think it's unrealistic to think that happens in the beginning. I think you gotta put in some time. Or the other thing is that there's a certain amount of time that's required. And it's like, if you don't kind of sprint at it, which is what I have done in the past, you can do it slower, but you just then have to understand it's going to take time. Like, let's call it 100 hours, right? Like, it's more than that, but like, just call it 100 hours. It's like, I could freaking grind out 100 hours in a week and just go crazy with it. And then I'm done in a week. Or you can do, 1 hour a day for 100 days, and it's going to take you 100 days to get that done. But you got to do the hour. You got to put the hours in regardless of how often you're going to go and do it. So I think you also kind of have to match what sacrifices are you willing to do, like with your desired outcomes. And then that kind of can structure the lifestyle around that a little bit.
Hey, Luke, that's a topic I'm really interested in, and I have a thought on it. And I want your take on what I think, and that is that if you have a choice between 100 hours in a week and 100 hours in a year or whatever, there's a sweet spot where you're going to, if you do it in a week, you're not going to be learning in between those hours, so that next hour is optimized, and there's an optimal amount of time to kind of sprint that works the best for kind of learning lessons, processing stuff, and being able to implement it and adjust as you go. Would you agree with that? Like, you don't want to be doing 100 hours for 6 months. You're better off doing 50 hours for a year, because you'll wind up with a better result. It may take longer, but
That's a good question. Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I can only answer based off of my experience. Like, I think it's really a personality type and probably like an environmental situation type, because it's like when I first started at 19, it really was just the grind. Like, it was like all I thought about all the time, 24/7. And it actually helped me iterate quicker, because like, it wasn't like I had an idea and then I put it down for a day and then had to come back and be like, what was I thinking? It was like, I could just quickly like go through all of that kind of stuff. So at that time in my life, I was single. I had no responsibilities. I had no family. I had no anything. And so it allowed me to like actually put in that time and focus and still reflect on it. And so, but I think that's a unique situation. I think for most people, what you just said is probably the best thing for them. Because at the end of the day, like, you have to make it be sustainable, because if you put in 100 hours in a week and then you're burned out and you never do anything after that, it's no good, And so you have to know your own endurance, with this. Like, we are running a marathon, And so it's like, if you can't sprint an entire marathon, that's the reality of it, And so it's like, I think a lot of it is also just knowing who you are and what you can do, and like not burning yourself out, and realizing that this is a long-term commitment. So if you had to choose a 100-hour sprint burnout versus, 100 hours in a year or whatever, but it's consistent, and then you can do that next year, and then the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that, the latter of the two is always the right choice, I think. Yeah, great question on that.
Well, Luke, you've had such great nuggets throughout this episode, and I just think this will help so many people. So we have to ask you, what is your favorite quote about success?
Oh, it's my favorite quote about success. I think it's the Zig Ziglar quote. It's you can get anything you want in the world by helping enough other people get what they want. Or you can get anything you want in the world by yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, by helping enough other people get what they want. And that's kind of our philosophy. It's our ethos of what we do here. Our mission statement at Ace Branding is to serve those who serve others. So we want to go find impact-driven thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and businesses, and amplify their voice through digital PR. So like, I look at everything we do as service. Whenever, even our sales team, like when we teach our philosophy around sales, it's to play the numbers game without making people feel like a number, because they aren't, and there's kind of three components to that. But the most important part is the comma at the end where it says because they aren't, because that's a core belief of ours. It's like, we are talking to people, humans that have real lives and real things going on. And it's like, they're not just a number, it's like, we need to get to know these people and genuinely figure out how can we serve them and how can we help them. And by doing that, it leads to long-term retention. It leads to all these great things that have great business outcomes. But I think that ethos behind it is really, really important.
Mhm. Well, and Luke, you've been such a trooper, because we had all these questions we wanted to ask you about your solo journey, and we didn't even mention Ace Branding yet. So feel free to give your little, I mean, you just talked about it a little bit, but where could people find out more about you? more about the company, give us all the links that we can include in our show notes.
Yeah, just go to acebranding.com. You guys can all look at my Instagram. It's Luke_Hessler if you want to go check it out there. And yeah, I kind of gave a little bit of what it is, but yeah, I think for us, it's I tell people like you focus on PR after you get the marketing stuff dialed in. So for you guys that are like solopreneurs in the very beginning, frankly, I would not be investing my resources in PR at this point. I think if you're a company that's doing like $1 million a year looking to scale, PR is a beautiful thing to go out there and do. And it makes a ton of sense, at that point. So I always like to just tell people who it is and who it isn't for as well. But yeah, if you are that type of person, you're over $1 million, we of course love to see if we can serve you guys.
Well, Luke, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This is such a great discussion. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, leave that 5-star review, share this episode with a friend, subscribe on your favorite platform, including YouTube, and we will see you next time on The Aspiring Solopreneur.